If you're a business development pro, you often hear people saying, okay, so you basically just do sales, right? We've all been there, and that can be quite frustrating because although business development and sales are both very important for the growth of a company, they're not exactly the same thing. That's why today in this video, we're going to talk about the main 5 differences between business development and sales. And this is going to help you explain your role with more clarity, provide more value to your company, and avoid some frustrations whenever people tell you that you just do sales. But before we get started, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our weekly BD hacks to improve your career. Alright, let's get started. Difference number 1, long-term versus short-term. The first difference between business development and sales, it's in the timeline. Basically, sales is really focused on the present, right? So what we want to do is to generate enough revenue in a given amount of time, meaning we want to sell a certain amount of goods or services within a delimited time frame, which could be 1 month, 2 months, 1 quarter, or maybe 1 year. In contrast, business development focuses on the future. What we do in business development is really to find new opportunities which can come from new markets, new value propositions, new products. And sometimes the projects we work on are a little bit more long-term compared to sales. That's why the timeline is the first most important difference between business development and sales. Difference number 2, validate versus repeat. The second main difference between business development and sales is basically their mission. While sales is basically focused on repeating activities that can generate more clients and more revenue, business development is actually focused on validating new value propositions, new products, new hypotheses, basically. For example, as a business developer, you might be involved in launching new products, new services, or maybe entering new markets. On the other hand, sales is really focused on repeating sales to a specific type of customers which is already identified as your ideal customer profile, and what you do is basically repeating the same process that's already been validated to work for that specific audience. Difference number 3, closing deals versus spotting opportunities. The main job of business development pros is actually to find new ways to generate value for our companies, and that's what we call opportunities. Now, opportunities can come in different forms and shapes. It can be a strategic partnership, for example, or maybe acquiring another company, or why not collaborating with a competitor. On the contrary, the main job of sales professionals is to close deals with our ideal customer profiles. So basically what we're doing is trying to find new potential customers that match our criteria and then try to close as many deals as possible with them so we can generate value for our company. So of course, both professions are actually generating value for the company, but we do it in 2 different ways. Sales by closing deals, business development by spotting new opportunities. Difference number 4, uncertainty versus certainty. A big difference between sales and business development is the level of certainty that there is in these 2 different functions. Business development can feel very uncertain and insecure for people working in it, because it's a very experimental field. So that means that sometimes we're working on different value propositions, different products, different audiences, and we're not really sure of what outcome we're going to get out of our actions. Sales, on the other hand, is more predictable and therefore a little bit more certain than business development. Why? Because once we have our ideal customer profile, a good pitch, and we know how many leads we need to convert them into paying customers, it's a little bit easier to know how we should approach our job, and therefore feels a little bit safer for people working in sales. Of course, I'm not saying that sales is easier than business development. That's really not the case. Both of them can be very challenging. However, it is a big difference that we have to take into account when we consider the differences between sales and business development. Fifth and last difference between business development and sales is the way we measure them. Sales is mainly mentioned in terms of revenue, right? You probably heard of quotas or how much money you generated in a given month or quarter. You might even be scared of that if you work in sales. This is because sales basically works on generating new revenue from new customers, right? And that's why the main KPI, the main indicator of success, is the amount of revenue that we generate in a given time frame. But if we apply the same concept to business development, we're gonna have basically a flooded business development strategy. Why? Because business development professionals don't only work on new client acquisition, sometimes they work on different types of tasks and activities, which can be related to new market entry, new product launches, and so on. Some of these activities, they are not generating revenue. Therefore, if we measure business development just in terms of revenue, we might think that our business development pros are actually not doing anything and not generating any value. That is why, when we look at business development, we actually measure it in terms of return on investment. In simple terms, the return on investment is the ratio between our investment and the net income that we generate from that activity. So, we can consider business development successful if we have a positive return on investment on our BD effort, while we can consider sales successful if we reach our revenue targets. Alright, these were the 5 major differences between business development and sales. I hope you learned something new and now you're better able to counteract whenever someone tells you that as a BD you just do sales. If you did learn something new, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our weekly BD hacks to improve your BD skills and grow your career. Have a great day and see you next week.